The dead conductress. Konstantin Kostyv had never liked traveling by train throughout his conscious life. After that horrific incident, he avoided this type of transport altogether. The mere sight of an electric locomotive filled him with dread. But, alas, intercity business trips were non-negotiable. Work is work. I need to pull myself together and go. Konstantin reassured himself. But this overnight journey. I couldn't imagine anything worse. His wife, Anastasia, tried to convince her husband that at least he would get some sleep at night, and would be refreshed and alert before his meeting with potential clients. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels is soothing, you know. You'll settle comfortably on the bottom bunk, and the travel time will fly by. After all, there are hardly any accidents on the railway. Airplanes are a different matter. If I had to choose between a train and a plane, I would choose the former. Without any hesitation. I understand all that, Kostya reluctantly agreed. But I have a premonition. A very strange one. My advice to you, just don't worry about it. Anastasia encouraged her husband. It's human nature to overthink things for no reason. You need to work on those anxious thoughts. Otherwise, they will simply take over and dictate how you live. Perhaps you're right, Konstantin nodded. Perhaps you are. However, no matter how hard the young man tried to chase away the unsettling thoughts, he didn't feel any better. It was with a sense of crushing dread and horror that he embarked on that ill-fated journey. Kostya was assigned a compartment without any traveling companions, which surprised him. 10 minutes after the train departed, a smiling conductress popped in to check his documents and ticket one more time. She left him the bedding and kindly offered him drinks and refreshments. Kostya declined the midnight snack. I'll have breakfast in a cafe in the morning. Right now, I plan to head to the kingdom of Morpheus. Tomorrow is a very important meeting. Of course, you need a good rest. The conductress smiled and closed the entrance door behind her. Konstantin quickly settled onto the bottom bunk, neatly arranging his belongings on the upper one. I hope I'm lucky enough to travel alone the whole way. Kostya said aloud. Well, he was indeed lucky. Konstantin traveled solo until his destination. But if Kostya had traveled with companions, would he then have been a witness to that horrifying and inexplicable event? That is another question. A question that, alas, no one will ever answer. Nevertheless, there is a certain romance to overnight travel on express trains. The clatter of the wheels lulls you to sleep, and the semi-darkness of the carriage plunges you into a doze. Dark silhouettes of trees, houses, and other structures flash outside the window. And our hero, he really wants to get some rest before the important meeting. Slowly, his eyelids close, and his body gradually relaxes. And then, there is a knock on his compartment door. The conductress. Another conductress. Strange. He had clearly let the previous one know that he needed nothing until morning. Could this conductress also be here to check his documents? Kostya reluctantly got up from his seat and opened the door. Standing before him was a young woman in an old, worn uniform. Her face seemed unnaturally pale. The hard work of a train conductress leaves its mark on the face of a beautiful young woman. Flashed through Kostya's mind. The young woman smelled of something sickly sweet mixed with the scent of decay and old clothing. She stood motionless, impassively scrutinizing the nighttime passenger. Kostya was about to ask her a couple of questions. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but for some reason, the young man didn't dare to ask them. "Yet," he said out loud. "My tickets have already been checked. I don't want anything to eat or drink. I don't intend to buy any travel souvenirs either." The conductress, without uttering a word, gave him a measured look and shuffled toward the end of the carriage. Her movements were smooth, yet somehow awkward. As if she couldn't feel any solid ground beneath her feet. A cloud of the sickly sweet smell followed her, mingling with the scent of the old carriage. Ugh, some girls really don't know how to choose perfumes. Kostya concluded, closing the compartment door behind him. Why did she disturb me? I was almost asleep. He grumbled to himself for a little longer, but then finally lay down and fell asleep. But he didn't sleep for long. He awoke during the night from a chilling cold. His fingers and toes were stiff, as if he had stepped outside in a 20 degrees frost. A deathly silence hung in the carriage. Kostya cautiously raised himself from the bunk and opened the compartment door. He peered into the corridor and saw her. The conductress stood with her back to him, staring into the darkness of the night outside the window. "Excuse me, for heaven's sake, what happened? Did you need something?" Kostya asked, but the young woman did not reply. Konstantin approached closer and touched her shoulder. Even through the fabric of her clothing, Kostya felt the cold of a century-old block of ice. The man trailed his fingers lower and took the conductress by the hand, but instantly shuddered with terror. Her hand was icy. The conductress slowly turned her head. She stood before Kostya, risen from the grave, her mouth agape in a silent scream. Dead, pale as death itself, the conductress. Kostya was paralyzed with horror. He was witnessing a nightmare in reality, but he had no idea what to do at that moment. A greenish-blue light, which had flared up in the conductress's dead eye sockets, quickly went out. She turned away from Konstantin just as slowly and once again stared into the nighttime darkness outside the window. And then he heard a muffled whisper from the loudspeaker. "Attention, passengers. The train is delayed due to technical reasons. Please remain calm. I repeat." The man dashed back into his compartment, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The whisper in the speaker continued, mixing with the clatter of the wheels. That night, Kostya could not fall asleep. In the morning, the other conductress knocked on his compartment door. Smiling and alive. Kostya wanted to ask her what it was he had experienced last night. Had it all been a terrifying hallucination? But the man immediately stopped himself. What would this young woman think of him? She would probably just take him for a madman, so he decided not to ask anything. Stepping onto the platform, Kostya felt as if he had climbed out of a grave. The fresh air burned his lungs, and the morning sun seemed unbearably bright after the semi-darkness of the carriage. Konstantin glanced back at the train, as if expecting to see something horrifying, but it looked completely ordinary. Passengers hurried about their business, no one paid any attention to his bewildered appearance. The meeting passed in a fog. Kostya mechanically answered questions, signed papers, but his thoughts were far away, in that nightmarish encounter. All day, he was haunted by the conductress's chilling gaze and the muffled voice from the speaker. In the evening, Back at the hotel where he was staying, Kostya decided to look up information about the train he had been on. Online, he stumbled upon an old article about the sudden death of a conductress in the early 2000s. The author mentioned that the young woman had died of a heart attack in carriage number 7. No one knew why it happened. In carriage number 7. Kostya whispered quietly. Good God! That was the very carriage he had traveled in last night. Then the man saw a photograph of the conductress. That photograph made him go cold. There she was, the very conductress with the deathly pale face and empty eye sockets. It was then that he realized it had not been a nightmarish hallucination at all. Konstantin had come face to face with a ghost that was, apparently, quite tangible. After all, he had touched the conductress, he had felt the cold of her hand. Or had he been pranked? But who would possibly do that? Konstantin said heatedly. Scaring a lonely guy traveling on a train. It sounds like the ravings of a lunatic. No, it was a genuine ghost. The ghost of a conductress who died on the train from a heart attack. A heart attack in a young woman. How strange all this is. He remembered the sounds coming from the speaker. Was he the only one who heard those sounds? An inexplicable, unbelievable, and terrifying story. Konstantin could not find any logical explanation for this incident. In the end, the young man decided not to tell anyone about what happened, so as not to look like a fool in the eyes of the public. After all, we all know how society views those who talk about the paranormal. At best, that person will simply be taken for a talented storyteller. Otherwise, he didn't even want to think about what happens otherwise. Since then, Kostya avoided overnight trips and tried not to remember that night. But every time he heard the clatter of train wheels, a soul-chilling terror gripped him. Thank you for the like. Subscribe to the channel.